Evelyn Coleman had cleaned offices for 17 years, and she'd learned long ago that invisible people see everything. At 42 years old, she moved through Technova Industries' gleaming corridors like a shadow, efficient, quiet, unnoticed. Her dark hands pushed the cleaning cart with practiced grace, her worn sneakers making no sound on marble floors that cost more than her yearly salary. The night shift suited her. 10 at night until 6 in the morning, when Silicon Valley's glass towers stood empty and she could work in peace. But peace was a luxury she couldn't quite afford anymore. Mama, this gear ratio doesn't make sense. Darius looked up from his notebook, his 11-year-old face scrunched in concentration. He sat cross-legged in the corner of the executive break room, surrounded by mechanical sketches that would have impressed college professors. Evelyn glanced at her son with a mixture of pride and worry. Childcare cost $300 a week, money she simply didn't have. So Darius came with her, sitting quietly while she scrubbed toilets and emptied trash bins in a building worth more than her entire neighborhood. Baby, keep your voice down, she whispered, though the 42nd floor was deserted. And stay in this corner, okay? Don't wander. Darius nodded, but his attention had already returned to the sketch. His grandfather's worn pencil moved across the page with surprising precision, capturing details of machinery he'd only heard through walls and ventilation shafts. Samuel Coleman had been Detroit's ghost genius, the black locksmith that automotive giants called at midnight when their expensive consultants failed. He died 3 years ago, leaving his grandson a leather tool roll and something more precious: the ability to hear what machines were trying to say. Evelyn remembered her father's basement workshop, that cathedral of precision where time moved to the rhythm of clicking gears and ticking clocks. She remembered how Samuel's weathered hands had guided Darius's small fingers, teaching patience and listening before action. Every machine has a heartbeat, grandson, Samuel had said during their last summer together. Close your eyes and listen. Now Darius carried that gift through a world that consistently refused to see it. The safe had arrived 3 months ago, a massive Mosso vault worth more than most houses, installed in a bulletproof chamber near the executive offices. Evelyn had watched Swiss engineers puzzle over it, had emptied their coffee cups and cleaned their frustrated fingerprints from glass walls. Something had gone wrong during a summer thunderstorm. Power surges had turned cutting-edge security into an expensive locked box, trapping $500 million in prototype computer chips inside. The company's entire future sat frozen behind titanium and quantum encryption that nobody could crack. Every night, Darius heard its irregular mechanical heartbeat calling through the silence. Mama, something's wrong with that big safe, he'd said 2 weeks ago. It sounds sad. Baby, that's not our concern, Evelyn had replied, fear threading through her voice. We clean. We don't touch. We definitely don't talk about expensive things we can't afford to break. But Darius couldn't stop listening. His grandfather's training was too deep, the mechanical mystery too compelling. Late at night when Evelyn worked on distant floors, the boy pressed his ear to walls and sketched what he heard: internal gears, spring tensions, the psychological architecture of Depression-era security systems. Tonight, like every night, they'd arrived through the service entrance where cleaning staff entered. Evelyn had swiped her badge, nodded to the security guard, and pushed her cart toward the elevators that would carry them to another shift of invisible labor. The building's nighttime emptiness felt different lately. Dangerous. She'd heard whispers among other cleaning staff about the company's financial troubles, about potential layoffs, about the billionaire CEO whose patience was wearing dangerously thin. Richard Whitmore had built Technova from nothing, transforming a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire. His corner office showcased awards and photographs with presidents. But success had hardened him into someone who saw people as either useful or obstacles. To Whitmore, cleaning staff were furniture that occasionally moved and required payment. Evelyn had encountered him exactly 3 times in 17 years. Once in an elevator where he'd looked through her like glass. Once in a hallway where he'd complained about streaks on a window she'd just cleaned. And once last month when he'd found Darius sketching in a break room. What is this kid doing here? Whitmore's voice had cut through silence like breaking glass. Evelyn had appeared instantly, apology already forming. Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry. I couldn't find a sitter tonight. This isn't a daycare. His eyes had fixed on Darius with undisguised disgust. Company policy clearly states no unauthorized personnel after hours. I'm not bothering anyone, sir, Darius had said softly, his young voice carrying unexpected dignity. I don't care what you think. Whitmore's whisper had been more threatening than shouting. Your mother works for me. You're trespassing. From that night forward, Darius spent shifts locked in the security office, watching guards play cards while his mother worked alone. But walls couldn't stop him from hearing the safe's irregular heartbeat. Couldn't prevent his grandfather's wisdom from analyzing what MIT engineers had missed. Now, pushing her cart through empty corridors, Evelyn felt the weight of invisible pressure. Other cleaning staff had warned her that Whitmore was looking for someone to blame for the safe situation, that he was angry, unstable, dangerous. Stay quiet, baby, she whispered to Darius as they passed the bulletproof chamber. Stay invisible. But some gifts refuse to stay hidden. Some wisdom demands to be heard. And sometimes, the people society overlooks carry answers to problems that defeat the world's most expensive minds. Behind thick glass, the $500 million safe waited in darkness, its mechanical heart beating irregularly, a rhythm only one 11-year-old boy understood. The night shift continued. Invisible hands cleaned visible messes. And in the corners of corporate America's gleaming towers, genius prepared to emerge from shadows that had hidden it too long. Part 2. The confrontation. The collision came on a Tuesday night when desperation made people cruel. Evelyn was cleaning the executive break room on the 42nd floor when she heard Darius's startled voice from the hallway. Her heart dropped into her stomach. That tone meant trouble, the kind that could cost them everything. She abandoned her cleaning supplies and hurried toward the sound. Her worn sneakers squeaking slightly on polished floors. Richard Whitmore stood in the corridor like an angry monument. His expensive suit rumpled from another late night of reviewing quarterly projections that painted increasingly grim pictures. Technova's stock had dropped 30% since news of the locked safe had leaked. Investors were pulling out. Contracts were being canceled. And now he'd found a child wandering his executive floor. I asked you a question, boy. Whitmore's voice carried the dangerous quiet of someone barely controlling rage. What are you doing out here? Darius stood near the bulletproof chamber housing the safe, his notebook open in small hands. I was just listening, sir. That sound it's making, it sounds different tonight. Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry. Evelyn appeared breathlessly, positioning herself between her son and the billionaire's anger. Darius, baby, I told you to stay in the security office. He told me I could stretch my legs, Darius said quietly. I wasn't bothering anything. Whitmore's eyes fixed on the notebook with its detailed mechanical drawings. What is this? Just sketches, sir. Darius held the notebook protectively. I like drawing machines. Let me see that. Whitmore's tone allowed no argument. Evelyn watched helplessly as her son handed over months of careful observations. The billionaire flipped through pages covered in precise diagrams, internal gears, spring mechanisms. Mathematical calculations that shouldn't have been possible for an 11-year-old. Double quotes. Where did you get these? Whitmore's knuckles whitened as he gripped the notebook. These show internal components you couldn't possibly see from outside the safe. I drew them from what I hear, Darius explained, his voice steady despite the hostile attention. My grandpa taught me how to listen to machines. He said, every mechanism has a heartbeat, and if you listen carefully, your grandpa. Whitmore's laughter was sharp and humorless. So some janitor's father taught you to be an engineer? Is that what you're claiming? Samuel Coleman, Darius said quietly. He worked in Detroit. He helped design security systems for, I don't care if he designed Fort Knox. Whitmore's voice rose, echoing off marble walls. You're a child playing with things you don't understand, creating distractions we cannot afford. 3 security guards had materialized, drawn by their CEO's raised voice. 2 executives working late had stepped into the hallway. Everyone watched as the most powerful man in the building confronted a cleaning woman and her son. Evelyn felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Sir, we'll go. Right now. I apologize for what? For bringing your child to work because you can't manage your personal life. Whitmore's cruelty was calculated, surgical. For letting him wander company property like he owns it? For teaching him to think he's something he's not? He's just curious about machines, Evelyn said softly, her dignity intact despite the humiliation. It's not causing any harm. It's causing me to waste time dealing with it. Whitmore turned his attention back to the notebook, flipping pages with obvious contempt. Then, with deliberate malice, he tore the first page. No. Darius's cry was involuntary. Whitmore tore another page, then another. Months of careful observation and precise documentation fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. This is what happens when people don't know their place. Evelyn pulled her son close as he watched his work destroyed. Darius didn't cry. Samuel had taught him that tears were private things, but she felt him trembling against her side. Stay in your lane, boy. Each word from Whitmore's mouth dripped with venom. Your mother cleans toilets. You shut up and stay invisible. That's how this works. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been watching from her office doorway. The head of security stepped forward now, her voice cutting through the toxic atmosphere. Richard, that was unnecessary, was it? Whitmore's eyes blazed. We're bleeding money while some welfare kid plays engineer in my hallways. I won't tolerate distractions when we're facing bankruptcy. The boy wasn't hurting anything, Dr. Vasquez said carefully. Easier. That's enough. Whitmore dropped the ruined notebook at Darius's feet. Collect your trash and get back to work, Ms. Coleman. And if I see your son anywhere outside the security office again, you're both permanently banned from this building. The threat hung in the air like poison. Evelyn's choices had narrowed to impossible: abandon her son or lose the income that kept them housed and fed. She knelt to gather the torn pages, her hands shaking slightly. Darius helped silently, his small fingers careful with the destroyed documentation. Around them, witnesses shifted uncomfortably, but nobody spoke up. Nobody challenged the billionaire's cruelty. Come on, baby, Evelyn whispered. Let's go. They walked back toward the service elevator in silence, leaving Whitmore standing victorious in the hallway. The security guards dispersed. The executives returned to their offices. Normal operations resumed as if nothing significant had happened, but Dr. Vasquez lingered. After everyone else had gone, she collected the remaining torn pages from the trash. What she saw in those fragments made her breath catch mechanical understanding that defied explanation. Insights that expensive consultants had missed. The drawing showed someone who truly understood how old security systems thought back in the security office. Darius sat quietly while Evelyn finished her shift. He didn't complain about the destroyed notebook. He'd memorized every line, every calculation. The papers were just records of knowledge that lived in his mind now. "I'm sorry, baby," Evelyn said when they finally headed home as dawn broke over Silicon Valley's glass towers. "I'm so sorry that man was cruel to you." "It's okay, Mama." Darius squeezed her hand. "Grandpa Samuel used to say that mean people are just scared people who forgot how to be kind." Evelyn pulled her son close as they walked through the parking garage toward their old car. She'd raised him to be gentle, curious, and resilient. But she wondered how many more confrontations he could endure before his spirit finally broke. She didn't know that Dr. Vasquez was already researching Samuel Coleman's reputation in Detroit's industrial circles. Didn't know that the torn notebook pages were being carefully preserved and analyzed. Didn't know that Richard Whitmore's cruelty had just set events in motion that would change all their lives forever. Some battles are lost before they're won. But sometimes, the smallest acts of documented kindness become the evidence that justice needs. The morning sun rose over a city that still refused to see the genius standing in its shadows. Part 3. The breaking point, the VZ. Third confrontation happened during a company-wide meeting that Evelyn wasn't supposed to attend. Tech Nova had called all employees to the main auditorium, a desperate gathering where their CEO would explain the company's uncertain future. Cleaning staff weren't technically required, but Evelyn had received a message saying everyone needed to hear what was coming. She sat in the back row with Darius beside her, both of them trying to be invisible among 300 worried faces. Richard Whitmore stood on stage like a general addressing troops before a losing battle. Behind him, massive screens displayed financial charts that painted a grim story. Without access to their prototype chips locked inside the safe, Technova had nothing to sell. Bankruptcy loomed in 48 hours. "We've exhausted every option," Whitmore announced, his voice carrying exhaustion and barely controlled fury. "The safe remains impenetrable. MET engineers failed. Swiss consultants failed. FBI specialists failed. We're out of time and out of solutions." Evelyn felt her son shift beside her. She knew that restless movement, Darius had something to say. She put a gentle hand on his arm, silently begging him to stay quiet. But some knowledge demands to be spoken. "It's not impenetrable," Darius said softly. His young voice somehow carried across the silent auditorium. "It just reverted to 1965 operation mode." Every head turned. 300 pairs of eyes focused on an 11-year-old boy who had just contradicted their billionaire CEO in public. The silence stretched like a held breath before Whitmore's laughter shattered it. Did everyone hear that? His voice boomed through speakers. "Our child genius has solved what an MIT couldn't." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, uncertain, uncomfortable, but growing louder as Whitmore's mockery gave them permission to join in. "Baby, please," Evelyn whispered urgently. "Don't." But Darius stood slowly, his dignity intact despite hundreds of staring eyes. When power surges hit old modular safes with modern upgrades, they default to original mechanical operation. The digital overlay masks the sounds, but underneath, a child is embarrassing himself. Whitmore's voice cut through the explanation like a blade. And embarrassing his mother, who clearly hasn't taught him when to speak and when to stay silent. The words hit Evelyn like physical blows. Around her, coworkers avoided eye contact while their own livelihoods hung in the balance. "I apologize for my son," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "You should." Whitmore's gaze fixed on Darius with laser intensity. "But apologies don't solve our problem, do they? Your boy's fantasies certainly won't." Dr. Vasquez stood from her seat in the front row. "Actually, Richard, the boy might have a point. I've been researching Depression-era modular safes, and power surge failures can trigger. Dr. Vasquez, please don't validate this circus. Whitmore interrupted sharply. "We're facing bankruptcy, not running a daycare center." Samuel Coleman was Detroit's most respected locksmith. Dr. Vasquez continued, her professional authority clear. He consulted for Ford, General Motors, Chrysler. His grandson might have inherited. "His grandson is 11 years old," Whitmore shot back. "And if we're placing our company's future in the hands of children, we deserve to fail." The meeting continued, but Evelyn's world had narrowed to protecting her son from the hostile attention surrounding them. She pulled Darius back down into his seat, holding his hand tightly while Whitmore explained layoffs and severance packages. After the meeting ended, employees filed out in stunned silence. Evelyn tried to slip away quickly, but a security guard stopped them near the exit. "Miss Coleman? Mr. Whitmore wants to see you in his office." Darius squeezed his mother's hand. "Mama, I'm sorry. It's okay, baby." Evelyn's voice was steady, but her heart hammered with fear. "Just let me do the talking." Whitmore's corner office overlooked Silicon Valley like a throne room. Awards and patents lined the walls. Photographs with presidents and tech titans documented decades of success. The billionaire sat behind his massive desk, while Evelyn and Darius stood before him like defendants awaiting judgment. "Your son has become a distraction we cannot afford," Whitmore said without preamble. "Employees are starting to listen to a child instead of their leadership." "He's just curious about machines," Evelyn replied softly. "It's how his grandfather raised him. His grandfather is dead." Whitmore leaned forward, his threat carrying the weight of absolute power. "And unless you control your son, you'll both be unemployed. Find another babysitter or find another job. I won't see that boy in my building again." The ultimatum hung between them like a death sentence. Evelyn's choices had narrowed to impossible: abandon her son during work hours or lose the income that kept them alive. "Please, Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly. "I'm a good worker. 17 years without a single complaint. If you could just what? Make exceptions because your personal life is chaotic?" Whitmore's eyes were cold. "I'm running a billion-dollar company, not a charity." "I understand, sir." Evelyn's dignity remained intact, despite the tears threatening to fall. "We'll figure something out." "You have 48 hours, Whitmore said dismissively. "After that, if I see your son anywhere in this building, you're terminated immediately." They left his office in silence. Evelyn held Darius's hand as they walked through corridors where she'd cleaned for 17 years. Suddenly fragile employment, a paycheck hanging by threads. "Mama, I'm so sorry," Darius whispered when they finally reached the parking garage. "I shouldn't have said anything. Baby, you were just trying to help." Evelyn pulled him close, her voice thick with emotion. "Your grandpa taught you to see things others miss. That's a gift, not something to apologize for. But now you might lose your job because of me. Then we'll figure it out together." Evelyn kissed the top of his head. "We always do." But driving home through pre-dawn darkness, she couldn't stop the fear and anger warring in her chest. She'd spent 17 years being invisible, working hard, causing no trouble. And still, one powerful man's cruelty could destroy everything she'd built. That night, lying in their small apartment, Evelyn prayed for solutions she couldn't see. Beside her, Darius stared at the ceiling, his young mind working through mechanical problems and human cruelty in equal measure. Neither of them knew that Dr. Vasquez was already making phone calls, that the fragments of Darius's torn notebook were being analyzed by people who understood their significance, that Richard Whitmore's cruelty was about to create consequences even a billionaire couldn't control. Sometimes the breaking point isn't the end. Sometimes it's just the moment before everything changes. The countdown to bankruptcy and revolution had begun. Part 4. The impossible challenge. The emergency board meeting happened 18 hours before. Bankruptcy would destroy Technova Industries forever. Evelyn wasn't there. She was home, searching desperately for childcare she couldn't afford. But Dr. Elena Vasquez sat among the directors, watching Richard Whitmore unravel like a man at the edge of sanity. "We're out of options," Whitmore announced to the assembled board members. His voice carried exhaustion from 3 months of failure. "Every expert has failed. Every attempt has cost us hundreds of thousands. Tomorrow, we file for bankruptcy and liquidate." Harrison Walsh, the senior board member, spoke carefully. "There must be something we haven't tried. Unless you have a miracle hidden somewhere, we're finished." Whitmore's laughter had a sharp, broken edge. That's when Dr. Vasquez made her move. "Actually, Richard, I might have something." She placed the reconstructed fragments of Darius's notebook on the conference table. "I've been studying these drawings from that child you humiliated last week." Whitmore's face darkened. "You cannot be serious." "His grandfather was Samuel Coleman," Dr. Vasquez continued, ignoring the interruption. "Detroit's most respected mechanical engineer. The man who designed security systems for automotive giants. His reputation in industrial circles was legendary. His grandson is 11 years old." Whitmore shot back. "And his grandson has identified patterns our consultants missed." Dr. Vasquez opened the notebook fragments carefully. "These drawings show understanding of Depression-era muscular mechanics that nobody, not MIT, not Swiss engineers, not FBI consultants, even considered." The board members leaned forward, examining precise diagrams that seemed impossibly sophisticated for a child's work. "The boy believes the safe reverted to 1965 operational mode," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Power surges can trigger fail-safes in vintage mechanisms that modern electronics mask. If he's correct, we've been trying to open it wrong this entire time." "This is insane," Whitmore said flatly. "You want to trust our company's future to a janitor's kid." "I want to try everything before we surrender." Dr. Vasquez met his eyes steadily. "What do we have to lose at this point?" Silence filled the conference room while directors considered the unthinkable proposition. Then Whitmore laughed, a sound edged with hysteria and rage. "Fine. You know what? Let's make this official." His voice rose with manic energy. $500 million if this little genius can open our safe. Hell, I'll give his mama $1 million just for the entertainment value. "Richard," Harrison Walsh started. "No, I'm serious." Whitmore was unraveling. 3 months of pressure and racial hatred finally converging. "If that ghetto kid can do what MIT couldn't, I'll personally hand him $500 million. Better yet, I'll make him CEO. How's that for your diversity initiatives?" The executives exchanged worried glances. Their leader was clearly breaking, but nobody dared challenge him directly. "And when he fails," Whitmore continued, his voice dripping poison, "both he and his mother are permanently banned from this building. We document this circus, prove we exhausted every option, and move forward with bankruptcy, knowing we tried literally everything." Dr. Vasquez spoke carefully. "If you're making this official, I want it documented. Full transparency. Company-wide announcement. Media access. Make it a public challenge. Gladly." Whitmore's smile was sharp and cruel. "Let the whole world watch this child embarrass himself. Maybe it'll teach him something about knowing his place." Within an hour, every Technova employee received an emergency notification. The company's final safe opening attempt would be broadcast live to investors and media. Their last hope rested on an 11-year-old boy. The announcement went viral before midnight. Tech journalists shared it across social platforms with headlines ranging from corporate desperation to billion-dollar circus. By dawn, the story had exploded globally. At 3 a.m, Evelyn's phone rang. "Miss Coleman? This is Dr. Elena Vasquez from Technova. I need to speak with you about your son. Evelyn sat up in bed, fear coursing through her. Did something happen? Is there a problem with... Mr. Whitmore has issued a formal challenge, Dr. Vasquez interrupted gently. $500 million if Darius can open the safe. But there are conditions. What kind of conditions? If he fails, both of you are permanently banned from Technova. But Miss Coleman, I've studied your son's work. I believe he actually understands that safe better than anyone we've consulted. I think he can do this. Evelyn looked at Darius sleeping. Peacefully beside her, this gentle boy who'd inherited his grandfather's gift and the world's. Prejudice in equal measure. Does my son have a choice? She asked quietly. Not really, Dr. Vasquez admitted. Whitmore has made this public. It's happening whether you participate or not. But I want you to know that I believe in Darius. And I'll support him however I can. When? Today, noon. The whole company will be watching. After hanging up, Evelyn sat in darkness, torn between pride and terror. Her son had a gift that could change their lives forever or destroy what little security they had left. Darius stirred awake, sensing his mother's distress. Mama? What's wrong? Baby, Mr. Whitmore wants you to try opening that safe, Evelyn said softly. For real this time. In front of everyone. Darius was quiet for a moment. Then, I can do it, Mama. Grandpa Samuel taught me how. But if you can't, I can. His voice carried quiet certainty that reminded her so much of her father. The safe isn't broken. It's just scared. And Grandpa taught me how to talk to scared machines. Evelyn pulled her son close, this brilliant boy who saw miracles where others saw only problems. Okay, baby, she whispered. Let's show them what Samuel Coleman's grandson can do. At Technova Industries, Richard Whitmore stood in his corner office, watching dawn break over Silicon Valley. His impossible challenge was about to become reality, and he had absolutely no doubt that the janitor's son would fail spectacularly. Some men dig their own graves with words. Others build empires on cruelty. Richard Whitmore was about to discover he'd done both. The countdown to truth had begun. Part 5. The Auditorium. The Billionaire. Auditorium filled with a strange mixture of hope and morbid curiosity. 300 Technova employees packed the seats by 11:30. Their futures hanging on what most considered an impossible long shot. Executives sat in front rows, their expensive suits unable to hide the desperation etched on their faces. Cleaning staff claimed back row seats, their quiet solidarity surrounding Evelyn like protective arms. Darius sat beside his mother, wearing his best church shirt slightly too small now, but still carefully pressed. In his lap rested his grandfather's leather tool roll, worn smooth by 60 years of patient craftsmanship. You okay, baby? Evelyn whispered, squeezing his hand. Yes, ma'am. Darius's voice was steady. Grandpa Samuel's with me. The stage had been transformed into a broadcast studio. Cameras positioned on tripods would carry this moment to investors, media outlets, and a growing online audience that had already crashed Technova's servers twice. Behind the podium, massive screens showed the bulletproof chamber containing the safe that $500 million mystery that had defeated the world's finest minds. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached their seats, her professional warmth cutting through the tense atmosphere. Darius, are you ready? Yes, ma'am. Remember, there's no shame if this doesn't work, she said gently. You're 11 years old. Nobody expects. I expect it, Darius interrupted softly. My grandpa taught me that machines want to be understood, not defeated. That safe isn't my enemy. It's just confused and scared. Dr. Vasquez studied the boy with renewed respect. Your grandfather was a wise man. Yes, ma'am. He was the best. At exactly noon, Richard Whitmore strode onto the stage like a man approaching his own execution. His smile was sharp, predatory, but his eyes carried something darker, the desperate cruelty of someone who knew his empire was crumbling. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed through speakers. Today, Technova makes its final attempt to access our prototype technology. Behind me, you see the vault that has defeated international experts for 3 months. The screen showed the massive safe in perfect clarity, titanium shell, quantum encryption panel, biometric locks that had become useless paperweights after the power surge. I'm offering $500 million to anyone who can open this safe, Whitmore continued, pausing for effect. But wait, our resident child prodigy thinks he knows better than MIT engineers. Every head turned toward the back where Darius sat. The boy felt hundreds of eyes examining him, judging him, most expecting his failure. Whitmore's smile widened. So here's my official offer. $500 million if this 11-year-old can open what our best minds couldn't. Live on camera for the world to witness. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. Online viewers now surpassing 50,000 flooded comment sections with reactions ranging from disbelief to outrage. Of course, Whitmore added with theatrical malice. When he fails, both he and his mother will be permanently banned from Technova. We can't have distractions during our final days. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. The ultimatum was public now success or complete destruction. Broadcast to the world. Dr. Vasquez stood from her front row seat. I'd like to state for the record that this child's observations show remarkable insight. Samuel Coleman was Detroit's most respected mechanical engineer. His grandson inherited more than tools. The mention of Samuel's name changed the atmosphere subtly. Older employees recognized the legendary locksmith's reputation. Suddenly, Darius wasn't just a janitor's son. He was a legacy incarnate. Fine, Whitmore said dismissively. Let's see if genetics trump education. The stage is yours, young genius. Darius stood slowly, his mother's hand holding his for one more moment before releasing him to walk toward his grandfather's moment. The auditorium fell, absolutely silent as he made his way down the aisle. Each step felt impossibly long, carrying the weight of his family's dignity and his grandfather's memory. Cameras tracked his progress. This small black boy in a too small church shirt, carrying antique tools worth nothing except the wisdom they represented. When he reached the stage, Whitmore's smile was poisonous. Any final words before you embarrass yourself and your mother? Darius looked up at the billionaire with quiet dignity. My grandpa taught me that rich people make complicated locks when they're scared, that they always leave simple ways in for themselves. Touching. Whitmore's voice dripped sarcasm. Now let's watch you fail. Dr. Vasquez approached with a microphone. Darius, for everyone watching, what do you hear when you listen to that safe? The boy turned toward the massive screen showing the vault. It sounds like a grandfather clock wound too tight. The mainspring's fighting against a secondary mechanism that shouldn't be engaged. Technical precision from an 11-year-old. Silenced skeptical murmurs. The power surge created feedback between digital systems and the original 1965 mechanical core, Darius continued. Electronics failed, but instead of defaulting open, it triggered Depression-era protocols designed to protect against total system failure. Meaning? Dr. Vasquez prompted. Meaning the backup system isn't about technology. It's about understanding who commissioned this safe in 1965. What they feared, how they thought, what numbers felt safe to them. Whitmore's laughter exploded through speakers. Psychology. The boy thinks he's a therapist now. But the live stream audience was captivated. Comments poured faster than moderators could process. Viewer count surged past 100,000 as social media amplified the story. Major news outlets began picking up the feed. This wasn't just corporate drama. This was David versus Goliath with undercurrents of justice that resonated across continents. The challenge stands, Whitmore announced with finality. $500 million if this child succeeds. Permanent banishment if he fails. Darius approached the bulletproof chamber like a young knight facing an ancient dragon. Behind the glass, the massive vault waited a steel mountain that had humbled the world's finest minds. He unpacked his grandfather's tool roll carefully. Each instrument was polished by decades of use, carrying Samuel's patient wisdom in their worn handles. Any last words, genius? Whitmore called Mockingl. Why? Darius looked back at the crowd, finding his mother's face among 300 witnesses. My grandpa taught me that scared people think alike, he said softly. And he taught me how they think. For the first time, Richard Whitmore felt uncertainty flicker behind his confident cruelty. The boy's certainty wasn't bravado, it was quiet knowledge, backed by generational wisdom that money couldn't buy. But $500 million was impossible. The challenge was safe, wasn't it? Part 6. The opening the bulletproof chamber felt like a confessional booth where truth would be spoken through mechanical poetry. Darius pressed his small ear against the cold glass barrier, closing his eyes just as his grandfather had taught him. The auditorium held its breath. 300 employees leaned forward in their seats. Online viewers now approaching 200,000 watched in absolute silence as an 11-year-old boy listened to secrets worth $500 million. 1965. Masara Banker's Pride, model BP-2-4-000. Darius's voice carried clearly through the chamber's audio system. Serial number ending in 447. Manufactured in Hamilton, Ohio, between March and June of that year. Dr. Vasquez pulled up Technova's acquisition records on her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. Every detail matched perfectly specifications that had required weeks of research when the company first purchased the vault. That's impossible, Harrison Walsh whispered from his board seat. Those records weren't public. The gear ratios, Darius continued, his small hands tracing invisible patterns against the glass. Mossler used a specific 4.7 to 1 reduction in their 1965 luxury models. I can hear the harmonic frequencies when internal mechanisms engage. Technical precision from a child silenced every skeptical murmur. Richard Whitmore's confident smile began cracking like old paint. This wasn't lucky guessing. This was knowledge that transcended textbook learning. The original owner survived the 1929 crash, Darius added softly. I can hear it in the backup mechanism's design philosophy. This isn't just about keeping people out. It's about keeping wealth safe during total system collapse. Evelyn pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son perform miracles with wisdom inherited from his grandfather's patient teaching. Beginning the sequence, Darius whispered, kneeling before the massive safe. Remember, this safe thinks it's 1965. I have to think like someone from that time, too. His tiny fingers found the primary dial, worn smooth by countless frustrated attempts. But where others had applied force, Darius offered gentle conversation. "Hello, old friend," he murmured words Samuel Coleman had taught him to speak to stubborn mechanisms. "I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt. But it's time to trust again." The dial responded to feather touches that barely disturbed its surface. Each rotation was precise to fractions of degrees that his ears detected through microscopic changes in internal resistance. First number, 19. His voice was barely audible. The year Technova's founder was born. Click. The sound was subtle, but the chamber's sensitive microphones caught it. One tumbler had fallen into place after 3 months of stubborn resistance. Second number, 63. The year Technova's first building was constructed. Click. Another tumbler surrendered to patient precision. Whitmore's hand shook. Sweat stained his expensive suit. Every number the boy spoke made terrible, logical sense, emotionally significant dates that wealthy trauma survivors would choose as psychological keys. Third number, 65. The year this safe was commissioned. Click. The final tumbler fell with a sound like distant thunder. Now comes the hard part, Darius breathed. Selecting his grandfather's most delicate tool, a timing instrument designed for watchmaker precision. The mechanical sequence requires perfect rhythm. Too fast and the failsafe engages. Too slow and everything resets. His fingers began their final dance touches, light as butterfly wings, timing precise as heartbeats, patience infinite as love. The safe responded to whispered mechanical poetry that transcended everything MIT had taught. Springs sang. Gears harmonized. Ancient security protocols recognized the gentle authority of someone who understood their deepest fears. Around the auditorium, 300 people had forgotten to breathe. Online viewers crashed servers as the count surpassed 300,000. News anchors interrupted regular programming. Almost there, Darius whispered. Just like Grandpa Samuel taught me. When you find the heart of the machine, touch it like you're waking someone you love. His left hand provided mechanical pressure. His right hand monitored acoustic feedback. His heart provided the patience that only comes from understanding machines as living beings. 3. Perfect clicks in rhythm with a child's heartbeat. A brief pause as ancient systems recognized legitimate access. Then, with a sound like distant thunder rolling across summer skies, the massive safe door swung open smoothly under the tiny hand of an 11-year-old boy. Inside, gleaming prototype computer chips worth exactly $500 million reflected camera lights like technological treasure that had waited 3 months for someone wise enough to understand that the oldest keys sometimes open the newest doors. The auditorium exploded. Applause erupted like a thunderstorm, loud, sustained, overwhelming. Employees jumped to their feet. Board members stood in stunned disbelief. Camera operators struggled to capture the moment while their own hands shook with emotion. Evelyn collapsed into her seat, sobbing openly as her son stood before the open vault, this gentle boy who'd carried his grandfather's wisdom through a world that refused to see it. Dr. Vasquez was first to reach Darius, kneeling beside him with tears streaming down her professional face. You did it. My God, you actually did it. But Richard Whitmore stood frozen on stage, his face cycling through disbelief, horror, and dawning comprehension of what he'd just witnessed and what it would cost him. The boy he'd mocked, humiliated, and threatened had just saved his company and destroyed his life. Online viewers erupted in celebration. Hashtags exploded across every social platform. Major news networks fought for exclusive interviews. Financial markets suspended trading on Technova stock, pending extraordinary developments. And in a small apartment in a forgotten neighborhood, Samuel Coleman's spirit smiled. His grandson had just proven that wisdom passed through generations of underestimated brilliance was worth more than any vault could contain. The impossible had become inevitable. The invisible had become undeniable. Justice had perfect timing. Part 7. The reckoning, the destruction of Richard Whitmore, happened in real time, broadcast to millions. Within 6 hours. Video compilations of his cruelest moments toward Darius went viral across every social platform on Earth. News outlets played his venomous quotes on infinite repeat. Your kind probably can't even count that high. Stay in your lane. Boy, some welfare kid thinks he's an engineer. Each word became evidence in the court of public opinion. By midnight, Technova's emergency board meeting convened with one item on the agenda: damage control. Richard, this situation has become untenable, Harrison Walsh said. his voice carrying finality that couldn't be argued. Our stock dropped another 20% after markets reopened. Corporate partners are canceling contracts. The board has lost confidence in your leadership. Whitmore sat alone at the conference table where he'd once wielded absolute power. Around him, directors who'd feared his authority now delivered unanimous verdict. "This is an overreaction," Whitmore protested weakly. "Market volatility will settle." "You publicly humiliated a child genius," Sarah Carter replied coldly. "A child who just saved this company. Our investors are questioning whether we can survive association with your behavior." The vote was swift and unanimous. Richard Whitmore was terminated as CEO effective immediately, with minimal severance and forfeiture of stock. Options worth $15 million. Dr. Elena Vasquez was named interim CEO to a standing ovation from employees who'd witnessed Whitmore's cruelty for years, but the consequences extended far beyond corporate walls. Social media justice accelerated with viral fury. The hashtag 500MillionSafe became the most trending topic globally, accompanied by millions sharing their own stories of workplace discrimination and underestimated potential. Whitmore's personal social accounts were suspended after threats overwhelmed platform moderators. Forbes removed him from their wealth rankings. Country clubs revoked his memberships. The social infrastructure of privilege crumbled under public outrage. Legal consequences materialized quickly. Civil rights organizations filed discrimination lawsuits. The NAACP announced a formal investigation. But the most devastating evidence came from security footage, revealing a pattern of racist behavior spanning years. Every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, perfectly preserved in high definition. The man who'd built an empire through innovation was destroyed by technology's perfect memory. 3 days after Darius opened the safe, Evelyn received a phone call that changed everything. "Ms. Coleman, this is Dr. Vasquez. I'm calling with some news about your employment status." Evelyn's heart raced. "Yes, ma'am?" "Effective immediately. You're promoted to Director of Facilities Management with a starting salary of $120,000 annually, plus comprehensive benefits and housing assistance." Silence. Then, "I'm sorry, what?" "Your son saved this company," Dr. Vasquez said warmly. "And you raised him to be brilliant, kind, and resilient despite facing cruelty that would have broken most people. Technova wants to honor that." "I don't know what to say," Evelyn whispered, tears flowing freely. "Say you'll accept. We need good people leading this company forward." Yes, of course." "There's more," Dr. Vasquez continued. "The board has established the Samuel Coleman Young Genius Fellowship Program. Darius will receive full educational funding from elementary through doctoral studies, personal mentorship from industry leaders, and immediate enrollment in Stanford's Gifted Youth Academy." Evelyn's sobs made speaking impossible. "We're also creating the Samuel Coleman Innovation Workshop, a fully equipped laboratory where young minds can explore mechanical engineering with proper tools and guidance. Your father's legacy will inspire the next generation." When Evelyn finally found her voice, she could only say, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing my son." "No," Dr. Vasquez replied gently. "Thank you for protecting his gift when the world tried to crush it." That evening, Evelyn and Darius stood in Technova's main lobby where construction workers were installing a new display. Samuel Coleman's worn leather tool roll now rested in a climate-controlled case beneath glass, accompanied by an inscription that read, "Dedicated to masters who teach the future. Wisdom has no color. Genius has no age." Darius pressed his small hand against the glass, tears streaming down his face. "We did it, Grandpa Samuel. We showed them." Beside him, Evelyn held her son close, this brilliant boy who'd carried his grandfather's wisdom through a world designed to overlook him. "Your grandpa would be so proud," she whispered. "He is proud," Darius replied with quiet certainty. "I can feel it." Within a week, major universities competed for the honor of supporting Darius's education. Engineering societies offered him their youngest membership. Tech companies sponsored research programs in his name. 11-year-old had proven that underestimation is merely an opportunity waiting for its perfect moment to shine. And Richard Whitmore? His net worth collapsed from $50 million to negative territory as legal fees mounted and assets were seized to cover damages. The billionaire who'd mocked a child's worth learned that cruelty has its own accounting. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest consequences. Sometimes, the cruelest jokes become the most expensive lessons. And sometimes, a grandfather's patient teaching becomes a grandson's triumph over institutional hatred. Justice keeps perfect books. And karma never forgets. Part 8. 1 year later. Morning sun painted Technova's glass towers in shades of gold as Evelyn Coleman arrived for work in her own parking spot. 1 year had transformed everything. She walked through the main lobby past Samuel Coleman's memorial display, pausing as she did every morning to touch the glass protecting her father's tools. Other employees often stopped there too, reading the inscription aloud to visitors. Wisdom has no color. Genius has no age. Her corner office on the 42nd floor overlooked Silicon Valley's sprawling landscape. As director of facilities management, she'd revolutionized how Technova valued its service employees' profit sharing, educational support, pathways to advancement. That honored dignity and potential. But her greatest pride waited in the building's east wing. The Samuel Coleman Innovation Workshop occupied 5,000 square feet of what had once been executive storage. Now it housed vintage tools beside cutting-edge technology, antique safes next to computer workstations, a space where mechanical wisdom met digital possibility. Darius spent every afternoon there after classes at Stanford's gifted academy. At 12 years old, he led Technova's Hidden Genius Initiative, program discovering brilliant minds in overlooked places. Mama. He called out when Evelyn entered the workshop. "Come see what Maria figured out." Maria Rodriguez, daughter of a night janitor, stood proudly beside a disassembled engine she'd rebuilt using techniques Darius had taught her. Around the workshop, 15 other children from service employee families explored mechanical mysteries their parents had once cleaned around. "It's beautiful, Maria," Evelyn said warmly. "Your mama must be so proud." "She cries every time she talks about this program," Maria admitted with a shy smile. "She never thought I'd get opportunities like this." "Every brilliant mind deserves opportunities," Darius said simply. "My grandpa taught me that wisdom lives everywhere. You just have to know how to listen for it." The workshop's walls displayed photographs documenting their journey. Darius opening the safe, Evelyn's promotion ceremony, the memorial honoring Samuel Coleman, Richard Whitmore's empty corner office being converted into a meditation room for employees. Under Dr. Vasquez's inclusive leadership, Technova had become an industry model. The company's stock reached all-time highs while revolutionizing how Silicon Valley valued human potential over pedigree. "You have visitors," Evelyn told her son, gesturing toward the workshop entrance. A delegation from MIT's engineering department stood there. Nervously, professors who'd once deemed the safe impossible, now seeking to understand the methodology that had defeated them. "Mr. Coleman," the lead professor said respectfully, "we were hoping you might explain your auditory analysis technique." Darius smiled, the same gentle expression Samuel had worn when teaching patience to frustrated students. "It's not really my technique. It's what my grandpa taught me. He always said that machines want to be understood, not conquered." He spent the next hour demonstrating how careful listening revealed mechanical secrets that force couldn't discover. The MIT professors took notes like students, humbled by wisdom they'd overlooked. After they left, Evelyn found her son standing before his grandfather's memorial. "You okay, baby?" "Just thinking about Grandpa Samuel," Darius said softly. "About how he spent his whole life being invisible. How people called him at night, but never gave him credit. How he taught me everything that matters, but the world never knew his name." "They know it now," Evelyn replied, pulling her son close. "Every child who walks through this workshop learns who Samuel Coleman was. Every engineer who studies your methods learns his philosophy. His wisdom isn't invisible anymore." Darius nodded, pressing his hand against the glass. "I miss him, Mama." "I know, baby. But he's here. In every gear you analyze, every patient lesson you teach. Every time you choose kindness over cruelty, he's right here with us." That evening, Technova hosted its annual Innovation Gala, where Richard Whitmore had once held exclusive parties for wealthy investors. Dr. Vasquez invited service, employees and their families to celebrate collective success. Evelyn wore a beautiful dress. Her son had insisted on buying her. Darius stood beside her in a suit that finally fit properly, surrounded by people who now saw his brilliance instead of his invisibility. Harrison Walsh approached with genuine warmth. "Ms. Coleman, I wanted to thank you personally. Your son didn't just save Technova. He taught us how to be a better company." "He learned from the best teacher," Evelyn replied, her eyes glistening. "My daddy may have worked in shadows, but he raised us all to walk in light." As the evening progressed, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the journey. 1 year ago, she'd been scrubbing toilets while her son was mocked for daring to think. Now they stood in the same building as honored guests, proof that truth has its own timing and justice keeps perfect accounts. "Mama?" Darius tugged her hand. "Can we go outside for a minute?" They stepped onto the rooftop terrace where Silicon Valley's lights sparkled like earthbound stars. The night was clear and cool, carrying promise of continued tomorrows. "What are you thinking about, baby?" "About how Grandpa Samuel always said that the smallest tools can fix the biggest problems," Darius replied. "About how he taught me that being underestimated is just an opportunity waiting for its moment. He was right about that." "Mama, do you think he knows?" "About everything that happened?" Evelyn pulled her son close. This brilliant boy who'd carried his grandfather's wisdom through fire and emerged transformed. "Baby, I know he knows. And I know he's proud of you not just for opening that safe, but for staying kind when people were cruel, for keeping your dignity when they tried to take it, for being exactly who he raised you to be." Darius was quiet for a moment. Then, "I want to help more kids like me. Kids whose parents work hard but nobody sees. Kids who have gifts that nobody believes in." "Then that's what we'll do," Evelyn promised. "We'll make sure every Samuel Coleman out there gets seen." Below them, the city pulsed with endless possibility. Above them, stars witnessed their quiet moment of gratitude and determination. Inside, the gala continued celebration of a company transformed by courage, humility, and the patient wisdom of a Detroit locksmith who taught his grandson that machines have hearts and people deserve dignity. Richard Whitmore's name was never mentioned. His cruelty had been replaced by kindness. His legacy of exclusion had been transformed into inclusion. The man himself had vanished into obscurity, learning too late that some prices can't be paid and some damage can't be undone. But Samuel Coleman's name would endure, not in headlines or viral moments, but in the quiet transformations of children who finally got to be seen, service workers who finally got respect, and brilliant minds that finally received the opportunities they'd always deserved. "Come on, baby," Evelyn said gently. "Let's go back inside. You have a speech to give about the scholarship program. Will you stand with me?" Darius asked. "Always, baby. Always." They walked back into the light together, a mother and son who'd survived cruelty, transformed pain into purpose, and proved that wisdom passed through generations is worth more than any vault could ever contain. Sometimes, the smallest voices change the biggest worlds. Sometimes invisible hands build visible futures. And sometimes, a grandfather's patient teaching becomes the foundation for revolution. The safe was just the beginning. The real treasure was always the wisdom to see worth where others saw nothing, and that inheritance would echo through generations yet unborn.